We have a panel this afternoon on making connections. I am going to do my very best to make the most of a remarkable group of people here with remarkable expertise. When I really looked at who was going to be on this panel, I thought, wow. So with humility, I am going to try to make the most. I think we have a whole hour. If you have questions or you want to add thoughts or ask questions along the way, I say please do. But in the meantime, let me introduce my panelists. Starting to my far right is Sven Ubik from Chestnut. On the screen is Justin Trieger from New World Symphony. Hello, Justin. He's having a beer. Okay.
Getting
beer?
some. No.
It's 9 o'clock where I am, 9 a.m.
Yeah, it's always 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Claudio Alocchio from GAR, Renata Kreil from Acunet, and Tanya Lisboa from Royal College of Music, and I'm Ann Doyle from Internet 2. And I am moderating, not weighing in. So we wanted to talk about, we've had a lot of conversations about what happened during the pandemic, and Renata really encouraged me when I sent my draft questions to think about, for all of us to think about the future and what we've learned and what we will do going forward. But I wanted to start with the first question, which is, at the end of this last couple of years, and we have learned a lot, some of the technologies we've had to use are less sophisticated than what we were using. What scenarios and solutions are you using most often now when you're collaborating with others? And I would like you to just weigh in instead of just going down the whole line. Weigh in as you see fit. So what have you landed on? What are you using now most often with others?
I can start if you want. I think with no doubt is the blended format of learning that we keep talking about, mixture of asynchronous remote collaborations and synchronous remote collaborations, be it high-end or more basic platforms. I think that has enabled us to reach out to countries where we had not been connected before, because the quality of sound, which was the main priority, we couldn't have anyway. So that allowed us to expand. And I think we have planned collaborations now using the high-end tech as we used to. We're catching up, going back into it. But we're now also using the home-based platforms, which we were not using before. And that sometimes is blended with the asynchronous virtual learning platforms that we use for teaching.
Interesting. So a mix of technologies that has extended your audience reach, or your collaborators, the reach to new collaborators.
Yes, and also that pushed us to design new forms of courses. We have, I mentioned yesterday, a Rio collaboration with the main conservatoires around the world. That's Manhattan School of Music, the Royal College of Music, the Royal Danish Academy, and the University of Performing Arts in Vienna. And this is for fully online courses. It's called the Global Conservatoire. I can talk more about this. But we're using Zoom and we're using Canvas, and it's been very successful.
Wonderful. Others, what have you landed on? What have people adopted most that you're finding you're using, or are you going back to what you were using?
Well, what we did after a long brainstorming inside the National Research and Education Network was we cannot agree that there is a solution. There are solutions, many of them.
Yes.
And they are all different one another, slightly different, very different, it doesn't really matter. But it is not up to us, who are the providers often of the solutions, to decide what's the best. So we ended up, we were having couple of standard solutions to make people collaborate, connect, do video conferencing, and the end. And we ended up in offering a portfolio, well, actually more than a portfolio, a guided portal to do remote collaborations, which may be video conferencing, maybe teaching, maybe something else, and which we called Meet at GAR. So enable you to do that. So we created this portal, and inside this portal, in the very end, you find the solutions. In the very end, you find EduMeet, you find Asterisk to make audio calls, you can find Lola, you can find Big Blue Button. You don't find Zoom because we have Visual Button, but you find a large number. You find Adobe Connect, whatever was available is in there, but it is not on the front page. So in the front page, we try to guide the user to understand, tell me what you want to do, answer a couple of questions, navigate down, and at the end you get a couple of suggestions. You might use BBB or EduMeet. You might use Adobe Connect. You might pick up a telephone and make an audio conference, which is best for you, etc. And it works, because people now don't go out with a gun and try to shut down the mosquito. They go out with a spray for the mosquito, and if they really need a gun, they get a gun to do what they want. So, and that was very helpful. It was difficult because you cannot imagine all the possible paths, because it's technically a binary tree, and there are so many escape routes out of the binary tree that getting the right answer is impossible. But at least we managed to give them some ideas. Then, of course, they can always say, okay, I don't like this proposal, I go back and do another. But that was working very well. The user seems very happy of this choice, also because it is not saying that, oh, I love this, I don't like this. Tell me, what do you want to do? I want to talk with people. Audio conference, that's enough. What do you want to do? I want to make a webinar for 1,000 people. Okay, BBB. That's the way you go, and Moodle together. So, and that was really a change, because before we were saying, okay, this is a list of products, go. Doesn't work. Tell me what you want, and then maybe I have the right key for you.
That is that's a wonderful development. I think I am actually going to call on Justin next, because, you know, Justin has been saying for years, the very first question we want to ask people is, what are you trying to do? Because it makes a huge difference what you're trying to do, which tool might be ideal. So, Justin, I am going to go over to you.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, so I actually, it sounds like Claudio and I have very similar perspective on this these days, which is, rather than try to impose a technology or a solution onto a partner, it's better to make an assessment about what the objective is, what the goals are, mutually agree upon those goals, because that's, I think, where a lot of collaborations can run into challenges, but also to have a solid understanding of the technical and resource capacity of your partner, because sure, it would be great if Lola was something we could use reliably with anybody and it was easy to get off the ground very quickly, but that's not the reality. So for me, it's much more about doing some pre-production, is what I guess I'll call it, to understand what your partner can handle and to figure out what the objectives are, and then, of course, you know, try to find a solution or combination of solutions that will help you reach those objectives and those mutually agreed upon goals.
Are you finding, Justin, that there is a more commonly used suite of tools right now? Or is it?
I mean, I think it's very obvious that Zoom is the elephant in the room, or the gorilla on everyone's shoulders. I don't know how you want to characterize it, but they earned themselves fairly a large market share during the pandemic, and they're holding on pretty substantially. Yeah. So the sad fact of the matter is that people are already familiar with Zoom, and they know at this point, they're pretty sophisticated in the way that they use it. So it is the most dominant tool in my daily activities. There's no question. There's some cool emerging things happening all the time. This space is continually fluid, and I think the issue though is all of the new software tools that come out. The question becomes, how does it supersede Zoom in flexibility, function? And if we can't answer that question, then it becomes a really tough argument to try to ask people to move away from a tool they already understand.
Thank you, and that's a very interesting observation, because my big takeaway as I walk away from this conference is, at the very least, with such broad adoption of Zoom, I'm committing to myself to figure out how to use better audio, Sonobus or CleanFeed, so that at least Zoom with better audio is a slight improvement. Renata, how about you?
Yeah, because I didn't know multi-site performance just for talking. We as Acconet use Edomeet to communicate. For the congresses we use Blue Button. I think it's a tool which was developed by an Austrian university.
Yeah.
And in general, and also I think for the future, and because of the project, and also with many talks with artists during the pandemic, and also what Lucia said yesterday, I mean, of course, everybody was so afraid and so under pressure that you took the easiest tool, the most comfortable tool that was available, of course. But now we also can reflect, and we try also for this project to really look what we want to use otherwise.
Yeah.
But of course, but the thing, Zoom is working better than Edomeet, yeah? But we have the decision what is more important for us, that we have to decide. Is it what is more convenient, or if we can ask the question. So
Yeah.
I also with friends now, Edomeet, and with other people, they also already developed some other tools, and we try to communicate via them.
Interesting. Sven.
Well, I am similarly as Claudio from a research network, so I am on the technical support side, and we do support for teachers for whatever they need. And for the Prague Academy, they usually do ad hoc master classes. I mean, rather than whole online courses, when there is some event, like for instance, there is Prague Clarinet Days. It's a festival of, this is a set of present master classes and performances, and they usually want to extend it with some distance master classes. And we use whatever technology is preferred by remote partners. They usually do not much care about particular selection of the technology. They rather say, like, I want to see student straight to his face, or I want to see the movements of hands of the student. So these are requirements of teachers we usually deal with.
Yeah.
And you very often try to blend them, because
Yes.
there's not a silver bullet for everything. So.
Yes, exactly. But it impacts the selection of tool you use. One of the other questions I am really curious to know about, and I am also from an NREN, are people returning to the campuses where they have advanced research and education networking, or are they just staying home? I mean, for instance, I used to go to work 5 days a week in an office, and I am now home 5 days a week. It doesn't mean I don't go in for meetings or whatever, but I now do not have use of an advanced R&E network. And I wonder how many, are you seeing a return to buildings that have our networking infrastructure?
Well, if you mean just the people working for the research education network is a world. If you mean the education community, it's quite a different story. In our case, I mean, I see that we really decided that it is okay to have a hybrid solution, which means that you can work from home a number of days a week, and then you work in the office another number of days a week, and it's really very, very flexible. And it really depends, because if you are doing some sort of teamwork, then you go into the office.
Yes.
Because you share the coffee and then you do the things together and
Yes.
so on. If you are coordinating something else or just following the project, then you can do it from home.
Yeah.
There is not really a big difference. What it is introduces flexibility. People are free to do whatever they prefer, and they find it most efficient.
Yes.
And most of the people prefer to go to the office, I should say. They stay home when they can do it, but if they want to do something, some of them want to go to the office just because they're not at home all the time, which is also very good reasoning. I mean, I don't want to live here, sleep here, eat here, and work here.
Yes.
I want to get out and be back with somebody else. In some of the cases, the reasoning is not only that you get the best network there, but you get the best human network there,
Yes.
which you don't have at home.
Yep.
Of course, if you want to do something like developing tools or doing some activity, you need the network of the results and education, so you must be there. I mean, imagine I was post-producing the videos for TNC. I could not do it from home. It's tons of gigabytes of stuff to be edited. I went to the office, so I was uploading and downloading fast.
Yeah.
Otherwise you get crazy. And if I'm writing a paper, I do it at home.
That's a very interesting perspective, that people will shift back and forth depending on what they're doing. Again, scenario dependent and on what their needs are. So if they want to do a master class, they might be much more likely to come into
Or they
the
definitely want to
conservatory because they can use something wonderful like UltraGrid or Lola. Any others who have observations?
I mean, at Arconet, so most of the people now are at home, so the offices are empty, more or less, because they prefer to stay at home. And I'm interested because in our country the energy costs go through the roof. Because also then I think if I'm the whole day at home and I also have all my devices, so how the universities or whoever will deal with it, because if the people all the time at home, I use more electricity than if I would be at the office, and perhaps the university must use less, and because the people are not there, and so that I'm really interested how this will be developing.
Yeah. When heat bills
Yeah.
quadruple. Yeah, Justin.
Sorry.
Yep, no, please.
So if I can read the subtext and maybe the unspoken question in the original question, it's, for me, what is the role of NRENs when in most situations, commercial tools like Zoom will be easier to get off the ground, easier to use, and provide a reasonable experience for a lot of things. And it's actually a quite simple answer from my perspective. There are still the killer app, as they say, for NRENs in terms of speed, bandwidth. And so those are the driving aspects of what will continue to make them relevant in the art space. Meaning, if I want to use a low latency solution that's high quality like Lola, I necessarily need that connection.
Yeah.
If I want to stream 8K, 4K video without a ton of latency, then I have to be in an NREN connected facility.
Yeah.
So I think if we want to drive more use and adoption and and resurgence of NREN activity in the arts, we're going to have to, as a community, come up with compelling use cases that rely on those aspects of what those networks provide. Because the traditional masterclass, which is asynchronous, there's actually a lot of good argument to do it on Zoom simply because it means that anyone, anywhere can join without the need of NREN. And again, reasonable quality. So it's about creating and inspiring people to come up with use cases that rely on what the NREN provides,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, Justin, it's also a matter of the devices that you can find into the premises of an institution that, of course, you cannot have at home. So if you think, of course, of audio gear, yeah, at home you can have a good couple of microphones and maybe a light, but of course you don't get a full audio gear to really transmit the sound as perfect as you want, and that's why people go. I mean, as far as I know, in the Italian conservatories, if you look at the schedule of the studios and the concert halls, you need to book 2 months in advance to get a slot, because they are all full, because people want to sit there, because it's a hall like this, with mics, lights, microphone, whatever, etc. is ready. And you cannot do it at all. And
Right.
want
There's
to have back.
There's definitely a practical consideration. I'm never going to fit an orchestra in my bedroom where I am now,
No.
you know?
Well, and I think the key word, Justin, is inspiring people, inspiring and reminding them what can be done. And I also think, I mean, one of the questions I'm going to ask a little later was inspired by Renata's thinking about many factors right now. It is a really interesting question. When my heat bills quadruple, I might turn the heat off and go into the office to work, because it's a collective heated space. And so that's a really interesting observation right now. Anybody else want to weigh in here?
Well, yes, I think we are talking about the technology, about the spaces, but there's all the, how do we call it, maybe psychological, if you like, things that go around all these connections as well. So we had, you asked if people working from home or from the institutions. We had students going back to the institution whilst, teachers going back to the institution whilst students were still at home. So we had no option but use Zoom. So this was done. I think there was one experience that the teacher was in the big concert hall with a big screen Zoom, and he was doing all the connections and everything. And that was perceived as much better student-teacher interaction, because you didn't have the engineer, you didn't have all the whole paraphernalia of cables and lighting and things going wrong and then delayed because you have to sort out whatever. So, that space that was created by Zoom in that scenario felt much more natural for the teaching situation. So I see now a real investment from the institution on how can we make this type of scenario for the high-end, if you like, platforms as well. So real investment in spaces, in support, and even going beyond. I think what we did before was very important and very good quality, but also was fascinating for the teachers, to collaborate with people all over the world. That's no longer the case. We can collaborate from home. So we have to make the experience even better than we had before. There are some investment now at the college to create a digital innovation lab where acoustics will be simulated from large concert halls, and then see if we can link that up with a Lola or whatever we're using. But I think we're not going to go back to where we were before. It's either going much more forwards, or we're going to probably be investing on home use platforms with better setups than we had during the pandemic.
So one of the things I asked Tanya if she might spend a few minutes on, you've done a lot of research in the efficacy of distance learning, and we've all been forced to do more distance learning than we had maybe done before, or at least some of us. And I wondered if you could share a little bit of your research, because I think it's highly relevant as we go forward, what we should be thinking about.
Yes. So in the past conferences, you've heard about my research on LoLA, musicians working remotely using LoLA from the institution was Royal College of Music and Royal Danish Academy of Music. And if I put a lot of data into a nutshell, what came out of this very clearly was that we had a shift from non-verbal communication where the teacher demonstrates and students hear the sound and copy. A shift from that to the more discursive verbal communication. So teachers really needed to think and to plan what they want to convey. Students rehearsing also need to be super clear what they wanted to do, and all was very descriptive. So I'm not going to talk about that particular research, but what we were doing now is research on the Global Conservatoire. I can share some slides in a minute, but the Global Conservatoire is based on Zoom. We've got 3 sessions on Zoom and 5 or 6 sessions in each module of the course, which are asynchronous with materials that go online prior to the synchronous session. And as I said, this is a consortium of 4 international conservatoires, and the idea is that each institution offers students from any of the other institutions courses that are not available at home, and courses which are completely different. So there was music and racism from Vienna last time, and dance from Manhattan. We had the digital musician, the RCM, and so on. And there's a real interest from the students. But what we're trying to do is build what we're calling a sustainable model of online teaching that's both synchronous and asynchronous, and most of it based on what we call flipped learning, which all the educators will know that you present the materials online first and then you use the synchronous session to discuss and to do the embodied work. So I think what the difficulties with this, and maybe I can share the slides if that's all right. So I can put some students' voice there. So those are the 4 institutions. And we are really working against the government sort of view that we should all be back in house, because this is what was in the press during the pandemic. So I made the point yesterday that during the pandemic, we did what we call emergency teaching, which is very different from what we're trying to do now. And I think this is a very important thing for us to consider. How do we move away from it? So the YouTube learning campuses reopen. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And universities told to give students face-to-face teaching. But this is not what your students want. They are really engaging with the online courses. Also, the students' survey of online learning materials, only 53% were well designed. Of course, we're doing it in a hurry, emergency teaching again. And as I'll come back to what you said, Renata, which is really important here. So this Global Conservatoire was conceived before the pandemic, but we wanted to consolidate and develop the teaching practice from COVID, move on from there basically, and to develop this global community which amongst the conservatoires. So the main difficulty here is that each institution has their own learning cultures, which are based on the higher education regulations, if you like. And the challenge for us is to create this learning culture and share this online. So those are you talked about the research, those are our questions. What are the challenges? How do we modify our teaching approaches in a planned way? I talked about this yesterday. And how we construct the transnational teaching and learning environments. So, sorry, I'm moving away from the platforms. But in the words of the students, they are enrolling in these courses because they want to be part of this transnational community. So we need to continue, although the government wants us to go back in-house, we need to continue to expand internationally. This is no news. And in the students' worlds, they said, it was very interesting to see what the atmosphere at other institutions are. It opens your eyes for many things if you have the opportunity to study and to know a new culture, a new different living experience. But they also said, and this goes on the back of the pandemic teaching, it felt like it was much better planned, this kind of education. it was nice that some classes you could just manage ourselves, so having their own time. And lastly, with the Zoom sessions, they could record the sessions, which they can't do in person very easily, and they had options as well for assessments. So very much appreciated. And bringing international artists at very low cost. You don't have to bring them over, and so on. So I'm not saying anything that's new, but the research is pointing at the students' preferences for this type of courses. And we just need to think very hard. I like what Renata said of the artist tech person. For us, he is the pedagogic artist tech person as well. How do we teach online? What do we need to do? So that's one of our collaborative projects at the moment.
And could I ask a question of Tanya while we're
Yeah.
on this subject and hopefully not take us too far off the rails?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, in my past experience, there is this opinion in specifically performing arts, higher education, when you get to a certain level, where instructors really want their students to be in a particular studio or a particular type of practice. I can think of, the traditional instrumental studio where there is a famous instructor, famous instrumentalist who teaches a very specific method, a very specific way. And the same thing exists for theater arts, obviously, and for dance as well, in terms of, choreographers with a very specific mindset about movement and approach. And so I wonder if you've come up against any resistance in faculty in kind of embracing this open model of learning from other people and other practice and other strategies.
Well, I think there's always faculty resistance, and you also have those who are very keen. So this is a project which is starting just now, and is all, that's why we're doing the research, to see what works, what doesn't. We had a dance module last year, and it was the most successful one. And the students loved it, and also the musicians taking the dance, it was completely different from what they had in-house, so it was very well subscribed as well. It was all based on videos, and the synchronous sessions worked really well. This second year of this project, there will be a historical performance module as well, exactly to work with specific instruments and see how that works. So the way that we went around this was to put a poll out and say, do you want to be part of this? What module do you want to teach? What would you propose? And then each institution came up with 2 modules. And I know that for the RCM, there were quite a lot of staff that offered courses, and then we had to select 2. So I think it's a mixture in terms of staff resistance. But they are much more into it now than before the pandemic, because everybody went through it.
Well, if I may, this is one of the studies that during the SWIM project, we did it on purpose. Well, they actually did it on us, which were doing the project. And it was what happens when one or more students start to get 2 or more teachers together. And in a summary, I can say the phase 1 is suspicion. The first teacher sit there in the corner and watch what's happening to his own student talking to another teacher, which doesn't last long. It turns immediately into curiosity and what I can say interference, because he's not there sitting there passive. Then when the other teacher and the student interact, he also start to interact. Then very often it happens that the student become listening and the 2 teachers interact with each other. And in the end, after a while, it really becomes a collaborative teaching, because the 2 teachers agree before the lesson what to tell the students, and then they let the student in. And in the end, it's really a collaborative teaching, which is completely different from what it was when they started. So this is sort of natural evolution. So I suspect you, something strange, then I'm curious, but I want to interfere. Then in the end, they do it together. And it happened also that they did it together physically when it was possible. So they went together to the same room with the student after that. So mindset change.
Yes.
Sven.
Generally, I see that people try to return to the academy physically because this is the field of education where distance learning is probably more difficult than in other fields of education. But the online tools are good to bring new possibilities, as Claudio said, not to replace traditional physical teaching, but bring something new which can extend traditional teaching.
Interesting.
Could I just comment? You said online teaching is more difficult, and answering Justin's question as well, I couldn't agree more. I think I gave the student voices on the screen, but I didn't show the teacher's voice, and they all talked about the immense workload to plan the courses, to create these resources, to, the trends, are you going to do micro-learning or not? So the teachers, in a way, had, and I'm going to talk about myself, I did the whole course in digital learning design, because you have to become an instructional designer. How do you do this? You're not just going to go there and teach your instrument the same way you do otherwise. So it is much more demanding, I would say.
Yeah.
I agree.
Other thoughts on this particular thoughts thread? Or I'll move on to another question if we've had a chance to weigh in. Justin, you good back there?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay. You're behind me, but I can tell you're there. So one of the other things, and I'm going to save time here because you all may have thoughts and questions, but I wanted to ask one last question here, which, how are world events impacting collaborations? Has necessity during COVID helped increase partnerships? Has it been detrimental? With increasing inflation and energy costs, a war in Ukraine, what impacts are you already experiencing, and what could be the consequences and strategies for this next handful of years with so much happening in the world right now?
Well, it is not going to be back as it used to be, for sure.
Yeah.
And I see it also indirectly at universities and so on. Universities had to go online, so they all got to get ready, and they all started to use online teaching tools, from classical ones like Moodle, BBB, Teams, whatever, Lola for music, and so on. When they brought the student back, and the students were very happy to be back, I should say, they decided, okay, we made the investment, we know how to do it, the teachers can switch on their Moodle session and recording, because they learned how to do it. There is only 2 technicians and 5,000 teachers in the university, so they had to do it themselves. And some of the university even officially told, you go on also online, even if your students are now in and back. Because students prefer to be back, not to be at home, etc. And so many universities now do in-person teaching with an online system on anyhow. And it provides many more advantages both to the teacher and to the student. Just to imagine one little thing, everything is recorded and it's on demand. So you are a student, you're just going to do an exam. Okay, I don't remember what was exactly the description about that topic on that day. You go, click, and look at it again. And it is much more easy for them to prepare for an exam, because they can exactly see what the teacher wants from them. It's not written on the book. It is what he told them during the lesson. Or for whatever reason I cannot go physically there, okay, I'm on the beach, but I follow my chemistry lesson anyhow, because I can. It's online, live, in any case, and so on. And even the teacher found it much more easy, because Teachers at my time were preparing written materials, printing it and giving it out to students. Now they don't. They press record, and then they tell the users the link. That's it. Go to my lesson. So everybody feels happier in a way or another. So this is something which was an add-on, which is not going to disappear, even if everybody is in the room at the moment.
Interesting.
And can I offer, oh, sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Tanya.
No, Justin, why don't you go first, and then we'll go over to you, Tanya.
Just from the perspective of United States, and this is again related to the effects of the pandemic. So we had a very public kind of reckoning in higher education, I think, during the pandemic, when people had been essentially continuing emergency teaching, like Tanya has said, and students, or for lack of a better word, customer expectation came to be, well, I should expect this all the time and be able to do this any way I want. And what that has resulted in are real challenges in terms of funding to support these new programs, but also, you know, the expectation and understanding of what it means to attend a university and what a degree is worth. So I think in the US, there's a very kind of internal or national focus on rebuilding organizations and institutions internally right now. We went through a lot of social upheaval during the pandemic as well, which is having very widespread effects on the education system. So I feel like in the United States, we are very focused on repairing our own social problems and our own economic problems right now. And I imagine that is happening elsewhere to some extent too. So I think we're kind of in a rebuild phase, and I think we've seen a fall off in international collaboration specifically because we are squarely focused on improving ourselves at this time. But I think it's just a matter of time until we come back to the world stage and want to find new and interesting ways to collaborate with people outside of the U.S. And that's not specific to New World Symphony. I think that's the general feeling in the education space here in this country.
That's interesting to hear you say that, Justin. And I agree. It's just very interesting. Even at Internet 2, our universities have needed so much help looking inward and trying to understand what they've learned, what the impact is of everything that's happened. And I do believe we will start to look outward again, but it's very interesting to hear that is also your perception. Tanya.
Well, I think Justin already said quite a few things that I was going to mention in response to Claudio. I think what we talk about here is how do we make the students' experiences meanwhile and worthwhile if you can either be there or not be there and it's the same. So the first question, is it the same in terms of having a student experience? The second is the online materials. We have a lot of discussions that this is not a black hole that you just dump all your stuff in there and the students will just click and find the materials. So how do you do that in a meaningful way that's interactive, that's is creative and that involves the students the same way you can do it in person? And I even go further and say it's never going to be the same way as in person, but we're working again with a new medium and we have to design appropriate for that medium, and can we really match and give the option? So at the moment we're not giving the option, you either are in-house or you take the courses which are designed to be online, because I think bringing the two together is extremely complicated, not just with the technology, but in terms of the experience for the student. And the other thing which came out, now I'm going back to the Global Conservatoire, which is totally online. One thing that has been very striking to us is that the students are asking for social spaces. So you do the course online, but you don't meet anybody. It's very lonely, even on the synchronous session. So how do we create the social experience if we're working online is a real issue at the moment.
Yeah. I would, if Steffi were in the room, I would put her on the spot and ask her. Every meeting planner I know says, all virtual? Sure. All in person? Sure. hybrid, I'm going to quit my job if this goes on any longer. That it's just that difficult, and yet it seems to be where we are headed. And, you know, Renata, you had given me a lot of input about pushing us to look to the future and how we're being impacted by so many outside forces right now. I would love to invite you to comment and share your thoughts.
Yeah, I just can talk about my experiences with the NetArt Coordination Center, and what I experienced is that many artists, I hope it sounds through what I say now, that they jumped into with their because of being afraid of becoming invisible. They used the networks like Facebook, etc. And then suddenly they said, oh, wait a minute. So they also experienced, I do that for nothing. I don't earn anything. And that also brought us to the idea, the people now and have to know so much more than before. And what you also said, how to handle the technology, etc., etc. Who the heck is paying that? And also that is a discussion we have to talk about. It is expected so much and so fast, but nobody says, yeah, I pay you for that. And this is also, perhaps we also try to have ideas, creating new jobs, for example. And I don't know, perhaps it's completely naive, but instead of putting everything on one person, people have to say, no, I mean, why not creating new jobs and give them names and also education for that? We also try to cooperate with the Institute for Computer Science. Why not? Perhaps we need really a lot of more new jobs, and people can work on and get money from it. And yeah.
And within the institutions, I think we're talking about staff development, so we don't have this separation. We are the professors and here's the technical people, and it's very hard. I think we have to start working together and work a lot on the staff development for the type of things that we're envisaging for the future. Totally agree.
And there is also something moving officially towards it. I mean, if you go and read the new version of the Erasmus Plus mobility program in Europe, we learned it 1 year in advance because we were able to read the draft and say, wow. It explicitly says that any mobility is not only physical, because it's a waste of time, but it must be physical plus something digital before and beyond. Because that's the way that, okay, I go to study in London for a year, but then I go back and I don't cut my liaison with London. I continue because I met people there, I made friends, I got a teacher, and then I continue to be in contact with them. And ideally, I should be in contact even before. I don't remember who told me, I think it was Jesper, that the reason why they started to make the remote auditioning before accepting students to go to Copenhagen was to avoid disasters. Because in many places, it happened many times to them that there was a mismatch between the student and the teacher. They never met before, they sat together, and they were not able to work together because of maybe the character of the person, whatever it is. So they had the student there from China, and he was not talking to the teacher. And so the reason they said, okay, now I do it in advance, so I try to make a remote audition online, so I understand what guys is coming to me. It will help me to make a better selection or a better match. So I cannot work with him, but maybe he can work with Tanya, so work with her and not with me. And that was it. So it was really helpful to get this sort of hybrid stuff, which is something, unluckily, some of the administrators in the teaching institution do not get at all. If I may be very nasty, some of them just believe, okay, you do everything online, so I save money, you don't travel, you don't do that, and blah, 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 because they never travel. So they never meet each other. And so that is an issue. Some institutions started to think no travel anymore because you don't need any physical meeting, which is completely wrong. Like Steffi said to some of us in the last days, when we started to make the European networking conference this year in February, we confirmed it, and our guess was maybe 150, 200 people will come. Well, we ended up out in 785, which was the same number of the last physical one here in Estonia 3 years before.
Interesting.
So that was the answer to the administrative people, so you are perfectly wrong. People needs to meet.
Yeah. Renata.
I just want to add what I experienced in Austria when I was, thank you, I was really surprised that during the pandemic that I thought now the IT departments of the universities become more, will be more people. No, absolutely not. I mean, we had, except the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna, they are really well equipped with manpower. The rest of the universities, they had the same, they had this, I don't know, 2 people in the IT department, but problems that brings for me nobody, really, even the best IT people in the museums I worked with, everybody is tired. You cannot come with, do we make a multi-site performance? They say, have fun, because there is no, they are tired, and really tired. And also what I experienced, many of my best colleagues from the museums, burnout.
Burnout, yep.
Many people simply canceled their jobs and were, because they were not heard. And yes, that was also, yeah.
Yeah. So, lots to think about. Do any of you have questions for our panelists?
David.
Hey, I have a comment, perhaps, maybe it's a question. So, on your second question about NRENs and their relevance, and I think one of the things that is going to be the most pivotal part about this is making sure that we have deeper collaboration, I think, over that. And I think the word of the day really in all of this is relevance and making sure that each thing is relevant. Justin talked about what's happening in the US in terms of the inner sausage making of higher education. It's all about relevance is what it's coming down to. And I know most of you know me just as the trumpet teacher, but actually I have a role as strategic initiatives coordinator at my School of Music as well. And one of the things that we just have to do is show the relevance in whatever we do. And I think there's so much opportunity within this group to try to have collaboration, and that's going to impact this whole idea of why NRENs are indispensable to us in the future. I think of a lot of what's happening now as what happened in the recording studio environment. You know, I mean, when I was going to school and in my young professional life in New York, you had to go to the recording studio to make things happen, but you don't anymore. I mean, you can do a lot of things, most things at home, but it doesn't make recording studios irrelevant, and there's certain things you can only do in the studio now in terms of high quality production issues. So I think, in a way, networks are following in that tradition. NRENs have this very special place. We have to make sure as an artistic community that we are going after collaboration as much as possible that can only happen on those NRENs. Yeah. Because we can meet at home and we can do lots of things at home on Zoom effectively.
Yep.
That's all I have to say.
Yep, thank you for that thought.
I would love, there's a challenge to this group, and that is that, you know, I would love for us at some point to try to have some kind of clearinghouse, database of people who want to connect with each other, to collaborate across continents, borders within our own, continents. I think that would be helpful. We do it on a personal level, but there's so many people here that have great ideas and that do so many great things, and I don't know that we have a place to connect always. So.
And this is also a great reminder, Domenico, maybe we can ask Steffi. I don't know if we're allowed to print and hand out the roster or share it digitally with just this group. There are privacy laws in Europe that I am profoundly respectful of as an American who can't keep anything private. So I totally appreciate your privacy concerns. But if we could share so that after this conference, somebody says, oh, I remember there was a wonderful woman from Italy and I can't remember her name, or who was the music therapist, it'd be great if we could have that, the roster.
I would just quickly say that, and then I will give you the words. One thing I would like to do after this is starting from a shared, like a Google spreadsheet, something like that, where we start from the name of the participants. We can make our area of competence and what we are able to or willing to do. I would like to collaborate doing a distributed dance performance, things like that, and we can keep it live and populate that.
Great.
And it's a starting point. It's not perfect, but it's a starting point to make this, to move on and build a community.
Good, great.
I think it's Timo and Robert.
I'm Peter from Düsseldorf. My opinion, I has been there for this is the third workshop. I'm part of it, and techniques develop very, very fast in the few years. And do you think we are now at a point that distance connection or distance teaching, distance learning, distance concerts are not an event, but become regular
normality,
a regular form of teaching, learning, and doing concerts?
Well, I can tell you, because very often people ask me, do you know if there is a Lola event somewhere? And the answer is, I have no clue. There is for sure at least 10, but I have no idea where. Because
which is good news.
Which is good news.
Yes.
For example, I didn't know that here last week they were doing master classes of singing with Sibelius just across the Gulf of Finlandia. But very sure now there is somebody somewhere which is doing some other master class or some teaching and so on, which is good because it means exactly what you say. It's becoming normal. And that's only for Lola. Everything else, at Zoom, at EduMeet, there are thousands of this stuff going up every day that we don't know anymore, which is fine.
Yeah.
I would just add that there are plenty of commercial companies that have been founded in the past 2 years that are built around the idea of distance learning entirely, like interruption, like masterclass.com, BBC Maestro, etc.
Yeah, and very often you see solutions which are made by commercial company, which are just a wrapper of some open source stuff but that's Opus. Yes. That's nothing else than a web page in front of Opus. So
we have one more. Let's take one more question, comment, and then we'll wrap up.
It's more like a comment. Great idea, David. I appreciate it very, very much. What about LinkedIn group? How are you?
What about what?
LinkedIn group.
Sure.
For this conference in general, and so then we don't have these problems what we have with the privacy settings in Europe, and so voluntarily we could join.
Yes.
If somebody from the group, the organizers, you could start it, and then sure we have already connections, but then we just deliberately enter the space.
Well, yeah, actually, before the GDPR, which killed it. After every workshop, we were collecting all the email addresses and adding them to the very old network arts list at jan.org. And of course, then we had to kill it because it was completely illegal. And a lot of people came back, why it doesn't work anymore? Well, tell the European government, we cannot do that. But of course, we shall do something on I agree, you click something and you enter into the group. And do something more modern than a mailing list. I mean, we can have a blog, we can have a wiki, we can have whatever you want. Much better than just a mailing list. So, yes.
Renata?
Yeah, because I hope it would be also interesting simply to become a bigger group that people could engage or whatever, but also to perhaps give us information about culture institutions who could be interested in their countries, because during the year, if everybody gives the month or two, so we could collect also more addresses outside the NREN. I don't know how to make it, I will ask Domenico, but to have a steady input of contacts, perhaps.
Good. So I would like to thank all of you. You are all immersed in this space. We've all together, everybody in this room has been through quite an upheaval that probably is one of the more memorable in our lifetimes. And we're such a forward-looking, creative, inventive group that it's been really great to have a chance to just host a panel saying, what did we learn and how do we think it's going to impact us going forward? And let's keep having the conversation, because there's no other community on the planet quite as innovative as this one. If anybody can figure out a bright future, it's us. So thank you.
Thank you.